Did you know that the first recorded murder in human history did not involve sophisticated weapons, epic battles, or wars between kingdoms, but rather two brothers and a deep human emotion? Yes, we are talking about Cain and Abel, an episode that marked humanity with blood and lessons that echo to this day. But what really happened? Why did Cain kill Abel? And how did this shape the course of our history? If you also wonder about the mysteries and symbolism of this ancient story, stay with me until the end, because you will discover surprising details that you may never have heard. And of course, take the opportunity to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now let's delve into the past to unravel humanity's first crime. Chapter 1. The context of Cain and Abel, the beginning of everything. To understand the first murder in history, we need to go back to the beginning, literally. After being expelled from the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve began a new life outside of paradise, marked by hard work and the struggle for survival. It was in this context that their sons, Cain and Abel, were born. Cain, the firstborn, became a farmer, working the land with sweat and effort. Abel, the second son, devoted himself to raising livestock, caring for animals with patience and attention. This division of tasks reflects not only their distinct roles, but also their temperaments and outlooks on life. The turning point in the story occurs when both decide to make offerings to God. Cain offers the fruits of the land he cultivated, while Abel sacrifices. But why were offerings so important? In the ancient world, offering something to God or the gods was a way of expressing gratitude, devotion, and a search for divine favor. However, not all offerings were viewed with the same eyes. God accepts Abel's offering but rejects Cain's. This rejection was not about the material value of the offerings, but about the heart behind them. Abel, moved by faith and sincerity, gave the best he had. Cain, on the other hand, according to the biblical text, gave something that seemed to be done without true devotion. It was in this rejection that the seed of jealousy and anger began to germinate. But how did this feeling turn into such an extreme act? This brings us to the next chapter, the reason for conflict, jealousy, and rejection. What drives a brother to take the life of another? To understand the root of this terrible act, we need to delve into Cain's feelings after his offering was rejected. Imagine the scene. Cain, who had dedicated his efforts to cultivating the land, sees his offering rejected, while Abel's was accepted with pleasure. This deeply affected him. The Bible describes Cain's face as falling. He felt humiliated, belittled, perhaps even ashamed. And as is often the case with human emotions, wounded pride quickly turned to anger and resentment. Instead of reflecting on his own mistakes or seeking to improve, Cain decided to blame Abel for his rejection. Here we see a timeless lesson. Jealousy, when left unchecked, can turn into a dangerous poison. It is a feeling that eats away at you from within, and that is exactly what happened to Cain. God noticed his emotional state and tried to warn him. Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do good, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do good, sin crouches at the door. It wants to have you, but you must rule over it. These words, recorded in Genesis, are God's attempt to prevent Cain from going down the wrong path. However, God's words were ignored. Instead of ruling over sin, Cain allowed it to rule over him. Jealousy turned to resentment, and resentment became a plan. He decided to act, but not right away. Cain waited for the right moment, a moment when he could confront Abel alone. This brings us to the darkest point in the story: murder, humanity's first death. The field, a place that should have been one of peace and work, became the scene of the first crime in history. Cain, driven by anger and jealousy, called his brother Abel to the field. The Bible does not go into detail about the dialogue between the two, but the outcome was tragic. There, far from witnesses, Cain took Abel's life. Imagine the weight of that moment. The first human being to die was not the victim of a disease or an accident, but of a deliberate act of violence. The earth, which had previously been a gift to sustain life, now drank Abel's blood. After the murder, Cain tried to hide what he had done. When God confronted him, asking, "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain responded with one of the most striking phrases in the Bible, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" This response reveals not only his attempt to avoid guilt, but also his coldness toward the act he had committed. But God knew. He heard Abel's blood cry for justice from the ground. This symbolic cry was not just about vengeance, but about the violation of the sanctity of life. God then confronts Cain directly and inflicts a severe punishment on him. He would be cursed, a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Cain, however, expresses concern not for what he had done, but for the consequences. He fears that others might kill him. In an act that mixes justice and mercy, God places a mark on Cain, a sign so that no one would take his life. This crime not only marked the end of Abel's life, but also left a dark legacy about human nature, the constant struggle against sin, jealousy, and the desire for power. Now let us look at the broader consequences of this event in the final chapter. The consequences for humanity and the legacy of Cain. Cain's murder of Abel was not just an isolated act of violence, it symbolized something much larger. It brought to light one of the most difficult truths about human nature, the constant struggle with negative emotions and sin. From that moment on, humanity has carried with it a legacy of choices, where good and evil are always in conflict. Cain's punishment of being exiled and marked represents not only divine punishment, but also a reminder for all of us. He became a fugitive, condemned to wander the earth without belonging, a figure of isolation and consequence. The famous Mark of Cain has become an enigmatic symbol throughout history. Some believe it was a physical mark, while others see it as a metaphorical sign of his guilt and separation. Regardless of its interpretation, it was also a guarantee that Cain would not be killed, highlighting the duality of God's justice and mercy. Furthermore, Cain's lineage, as described in the Bible, did not follow a path of redemption. His descendant Lamech perpetuated violence, highlighting that the actions of an individual can reverberate for generations. But there is something deeper in this story. The cry of Abel's blood represents the search for justice and the recognition of the value of life. This idea permeates several cultures and religions, teaching that every action has consequences and that in the end justice prevails. For us, Cain and Abel are not just characters from an ancient story, but a mirror of human choices to this day. Envy, jealousy, and pride are still challenges that we face daily, but we also carry the capacity to do good, to redeem ourselves, and to care for one another. And so, the tragedy of Cain and Abel serves as a powerful warning and an eternal reflection on our actions, choices, and the impact they can have on the world around us. Conclusion. The story of Cain and Abel is not just about humanity's first murder, but about the complexity of our nature. It is a call for us to reflect on our own actions and emotions. After all, are we our brothers, responsible for each other, or do we prefer to ignore this truth? Now, we want to know from you, what lesson did this story leave the biggest impression on you? Write in the comments. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who is also interested in these fascinating stories. Until next time.